Shabbat, Shalom, Happy Sabbath. We're thankful once more that Yah has brought us here and we have heeded his word to come and praise him. Our subject today is the kingdom of Yahudah in Africa. The kingdom of Judah in Alkebulan. And so this morning we want to take a look firstly at a man who was born in slavery. And he grew up to become the deliverer of the people in slavery. We know him as Moshe or Moses. We want to use him as a periscope to look at a people who have been in distress for many years. And even today, their identity is still a mystery. We want to look at that this morning. And so, in qualitative terms, the question must be asked: who are the children of Israel? Who? And even more so, why is Japheth dwelling in Shem's tent? We want to address those questions this morning because at the beginning of the 8th century, the world was polarized with two religions, superpower religions. That is Christianity and Islam. And they ruled the world in terms of religion. A third force within that was the kingdom of Khazars, a people from Turkey that later ended up in the Caucasus Mountain in Russia, Ukraine, and the places like that. And both of these religions, Christianity and Islam, wanted the Khazar kingdom to join them. And they tried to influence them. But the king of the Khazars decided that it wasn't in his best interest to join either of them, so he joined Judaism. And so we're dealing today with the people who adapted Judaism as their religion. These are the people we're dealing with today, many of which are in Israel claiming Jewry, but they're not technically descendants of Abraham in that sense, because Moses tells us that they are, the Ashkenazi, they are children of Japheth. And so we want to look at that. Let's turn to the book of Hebrews that was earlier read, and we will turn to chapter 11. Often people refer to this as the hall of faith or hall of belief. In some Bible it says belief, and some other Bible says faith, meaning the same thing. And we will start at verse 23. By faith, Moshe, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. Did you hear that? A command had gone out by the Pharaoh saying all baby boys must be killed. But the word says here that Hamran and Jochebed, they were not afraid. They were not afraid when they looked on this young boy, this baby boy. They saw something in him. The word says he was a proper child. It was a beautiful child. He had this divine look on him, put on him by Yah. That's what the word says, or implies here. By faith, Moshe, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. I want to dwell on that. On Wednesday evening, I touched upon this. That here is a man who is now at age, and he realizes that he's not an Egyptian. And in choosing to be an Hebrew, he will have to reject glory of Egypt. He will have to reject that and choose affliction. Understand what is happening here. Moshe is a young man, and he's at the age where he has the capacity and the ability to enjoy good things. And he decides, I don't want to be an Egyptian. I don't want to be king of Israel, of Egypt. I would prefer to be in the mud huts with the children of my people. Think how many of us would have taken that decision. Think of it. To be Pharaoh of Egypt, people genuflecting at your feet, counselors coming to see you. Its power, its authority, its influence. Moses says, I don't want that. And that's a serious decision. He is rejecting power and authority and would rather align himself with the people of Yah. That's what the word says. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of Elohim than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Moses realizes that if he were to take that, it would only be for a season. That's what sin is, for a season. And so, by faith, he forsook Egypt. Now, the question must be reflected on. Moses, all along, did not know that he was not an Egyptian. He did not know that. The word says he was learned in all the languages, in all the mysteries of Egypt. He knew Egypt. And he was well respected among the people. But when he found out that he was Hebrew, he had to make a decision. And so this morning, I want to speak to a group of people in relation to that reality. Many of us here and beyond. We were raised as Christians. Whatever denomination you might belong to, whether you be Church of England, whether you be Seventh-day Adventist, whether you be Pentecostal, Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopalian, whatever it is, you were raised a Christian. But now, according to Baruch chapter 2 and verse 30, Baruch, the scribe that wrote for Jeremiah, is letting us know in the end time, the now time, when we are in the lands of our captivity, whether it be America or whether it be England, whether it be Brazil, the Caribbean, wherever you are, wherever you were sojourned to, you are going to find out who you are, and you're going to call upon Yah. And now, even as Moses had come to tell the people or tell Pharaoh to let the people go, our duty is to let the people know. And what's that message? That you're Hebrew. So like Moses, we are finding out that we are Hebrew Israelites. So what decision will you make on that, churches? What decision will you make? We all know what Moses did. Moses gave up the glory, the positions that he had. Perhaps you're a pastor. Perhaps you're a bishop. Perhaps you're a priest. Perhaps you're departmental head in one of the Eurocentric churches. But now you're finding out that you are a Hebrew. What will you do? Moses did not ask, where shall I go? He knew that he should be among his people. He knew that. Moreover, when you read Jeremiah 31 to 33, we are told that Yahweh is going to make a covenant with Judah and with Israel. It's going to do that. So if you're not in covenant with him, it behooves you to come in covenant with him and to do that which you ought to do and live even as an Hebrew Israelite lives. That's what Moses did. And so this morning, we want to look at the footsteps of Moses and see whether we can pattern him even as he patterned Yeshua in his walk. And so I'm going to turn to the book of Jasher. The book of Jasher. And I'm reading from chapter 71. Because part of the teachings that they have given us is that when Moses left Egypt, that he went to Midian at 40 years old. That's what they teach us. They never told us that Moses went and became the king of the Cushite. They never told us that. That Moses was a king among the Cushites. Verse 1. And when Moses was 18 years old, he desired to see his father and mother, and he went to them at Goshen. He was 18 years old. According to the book of Jasher. He came to the place when the children of Israel were engaged in work And he observed their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian smiting one of the Hebrew children. He was 18 at the time. Again, I emphasize according to the book of Jasher. And when the man was beaten, saw Moses, ran to him for help. So the man Moses was greatly respected in the house of Pharaoh. But hold it there, because there is a question emerging here. A command went out from Pharaoh that all the baby boys must be killed. And according to the book of Exodus, chapter 2, Pharaoh's daughter went out and saw this beautiful child in a basket on the river Gihon. Because scholars tell us that the river Gihon is the same river that is the Nile, that stretches all the way back to the Garden of Eden, that encompasses all of Ethiopia, including Sudan. So Moses was put on the Gihon River, if we call it by its proper name. So my question really is this, the question that emerged from my reading. Pharaoh's daughter knew, because the word says, when she saw the child, she says, this is one of the Hebrews' children. She knew. And if she knew and she lives in Pharaoh's house, one must assume that Pharaoh also knew. Why was Moses not killed? Why? There's a decree, a law sent out that all baby boys must be killed. And who else other than Pharaoh's house found a Hebrew child and took him into her house, and Pharaoh knew? You know, sometimes preachers preach and teachers teach, but they're no good at doing what they teach. They impose things on other people, but they don't practice it at all. They tell you what they believe, but when it comes to their house, it's not the same thing. If something is wrong, it's wrong even in your own house. We can impose things on other people and expect not the same rules to apply to us. Pharaoh, you made a law. Of course, we know that, yes, providence was all in this. We know that because this young man here was raised up to lead the Hebrew black Israelite out of slavery. We understand that. But let me continue in Jasher, because he went out to see his mother and father, because he's now 18 years old, and he wants to know, it's like an adopted child who wants to know his real parents. And he says, when the man told him that this Egyptian man came into his house and came on to his wife. And when Moses heard this, he was most displeased, and he dealt with the man, and he died, and he shoved him into the sand and buried him. He buried him. And the word says, when the man returned to his home, he thought of repudiating his wife, for it was not right in the house of Jacob for any man to come into his wife while she was defiled. That's how it was then. And so the woman complained to her brothers, and they wanted to slay him. So he had to flee. But then Pharaoh found out what Moses had done, and Moses fled. The word said he fled at 18 years old, and he lived in the land of Cush. He did. But I want to make this point also in chapter 70, that, well, verse 44, it says, "And Moses said unto Pharaoh, Let there be given unto the servants of the children of Israel, who are in Goshen, 1 day to rest therein from her labor." Moses here is speaking to Pharaoh before they are led out of Egypt, before they reach Mount Sinai. And the king answered, Pharaoh answered and said to him, "Behold, I have lifted up thy face in this thing to grant the request." And Pharaoh ordered a proclamation to be issued throughout Egypt and Goshen, saying, "To you, all the children of Israel, thus saith the king, for 6 days you shall do your work." Pharaoh is saying this. 6 days you shall do your work and labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest. Pharaoh gave the children of Israel the Sabbath to keep while they were in slavery. While they were in slavery, they kept the Sabbath. The commandment had not yet been given at Mount Sinai. So when I hear people say the commandments were only for the Jews, come on. You're doing sloppy scholarship. And moreover, Yeshua at one time was having a relationship, conversational relationship, that is, with some Pharisees. And they wanted him to know, this is in John chapter 8, if you want to read that. They wanted him to know that Abraham is their father, and they have the law. Yeshua here is talking about faith. We have the law, and we know Abraham is our father. So when you read the book of Hebrews, come on. When you read the book of Hebrews, the writer is letting you know that Moshe is the lawgiver. Are you with me? He's not only the lawgiver, but he was faithful. And therefore, faith and law, they are not mutually exclusive. Moses, it says, by faith. So even though he was the lawgiver, he had to be faithful to that which he was given to the people. That's the point I was making earlier. That Pharaoh made a law in Egypt and saying all the babies should be killed. But he was saying, not the ones in my house. That's what he was saying. But Moses, even though he is the lawgiver, he's saying, I must be faithful to the law that I give to the people. Such should be the church. Such should be the church. So Yeshua said to them, do you believe in Moses? Do you? Do you believe in Moses? Because Moses wrote about me. He wrote about me. And he said the same thing in chapter 24 of the book of Luke to Cleopas, that's his earthly father's brother, so that was his uncle. Do you believe in Moses? And he took them on a Bible course and showed them what Moses had written about him, and that this has now come to pass. So the question comes to us, do we believe in Moses? Moses found out that he was not Egyptian, as many of us now are finding out that many of our ancestors who were taken from West Africa because they had migrated from Israel, their homeland, the original aborigines, primordial aborigines, they're realizing now, wow, I'm a descendant of them. Then if that's so, you have a decision to make. Will you continue in your Egyptian bondage religion, or will you liberate yourself in the faith of Yeshua? Will you do that? So come with me to the book of Deuteronomy, book of Deuteronomy. They call it the second book of the law. And we look at chapter 28. Here, Moses is writing a kind of an epilogue. It's his last moments with the people, and he's speaking primarily to the second generation, because many of the others, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, they had died because of unbelief. So the second generation now is letting them know, when you go into the promised land, this is how you ought to behave yourself and conduct yourself in righteousness. There are blessings and there are cursing. Choose blessings. He wants them to know that. And it opens up in the first verse saying, and it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that Yahweh thy Elohim will set thee on high above all nations on the earth. Listen to me. Moses is speaking to the black Hebrew Israelites. And he's letting them know, you have been commissioned, earmarked, to be the head in the world and not the tail. You will be like it was before, when great black men ruled the world and Europe was still in the Dark Ages. That's what he's letting them know. In North Africa, we had Tunisia, as we discussed in Sabbath school. Great nation. And it was Tunisia that fought 3 Punic wars with Rome. But they don't tell us that, not in the way they ought to have told us. They didn't tell us that. They tell us that Hannibal took his elephants over the Alps into Italy and won many victories there, but they didn't tell us that he was a North African man. They did not tell us that. And so we were at a loss to find out that Tunisia, Carthage, let's call it Carthage, because that's what they put. And many of the fathers of the Catholic Church, they are from North Africa. And so Africa is the birthplace of knowledge. It's the birthplace of understanding and wisdom, at which time, when the Third Punic War had finished in 146, it was then Europe started to come, and many scholars will perhaps tell you that it was through Crete that Europe started to raise its head as some kind of power. But Paul already told us what these people are like. Paul says all Christians are liars. That's what the Apostle Paul said. They're liars. And we have found that out in history in the way that they have written our history, and they have written us out of our own history. That's why we have to read and write our own history. That's why. Because it's there. And so Moses here is telling the people, choose blessings. Because it's not going to go well with you if you disobey Yah. And all the blessing, verse 2, shall come on thee and overtake thee if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim. Did you hear that? Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shalt be the fruit of thy body, your children, and the fruit of thy ground, your land, your crop, your farms, and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of the sheep. You will be overwhelmed with blessings. Just obey. Blessed shall thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. Yahweh shall cause thine enemies, that who? Thine enemies that rise up against thee, to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against one way and flee before thee 7 ways. Just obey Yah. All the people now and their ancestors who had you in slavery, had you obey Yah, they would come at you one way, but they would flee 7 ways. All you had to do, all we had to do was to obey Yah. And so when we speak of slavery, and we just had last month Black History Month, but as per usual, they're only dealing with the 16th and the 17th century of slavery. Slavery started way back. And so Moshe is telling us, verse 15, but it shall come to pass if thou wilt not hearken, if you don't obey Yah, if you do not obey his voice, to observe to do all his commandments, not some, his commandments as his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all of these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shall be you in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Everything about you will be cursed. Your blessing will become a curse. And then in verse 68, Moshe signs off with this. He says, and Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spoke unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. The Bible is telling us who our enemies are, the people who bought us in slavery. Have they changed? The evidence is scant. Is it? No, it's overwhelming. And so understand this. Understand this. That when Yeshua spoke to the people in Israel, he says, when you see Jerusalem encompassed with armies, flee. Flee. is pointing, or he was pointing, to the time of Titus, the Roman general, who would come and destroy the city. So he said, when you see the armies are coming, flee. And the regal Negroes fled, as I indicated last Wednesday, to North Africa. Did they? West Africa. West Africa. They fled to West Africa, to Ghana, Guinea, Togo, Benin, Nigeria. They went to all those places, and they were picked up. Who got picked up? Hebrew Israelites, and brought to the Americas and to Britain and to other places, including the Caribbean. And so we are now realizing that all the people who were taken from Africa, all of them, they were Jews. They were Jews. And the maps that they wrote said on it, the kingdom of Judah. Why? Because the people who went there near Benin were from Israel. They are Shemitic people, not Amitic people. And as I indicated again then, I said that when they went there, the indigenous African, the Amitic people, fell out with them and joined with the Arabs and sold them to the merchant, the Ashkenazis, and the British and the Americans later on. And so that's what we're dealing with. But the Khazars that I mentioned earlier, the Turkish people that moved to the sons of Japheth, that moved to the Caucasus Mountain, were later taken under the Balfour Agreement from Europe and brought to Israel, the majority of them. Notice also, when Yeshua gave the warning to flee, some of our people fled to Spain. The Sephardim, they fled to Spain, and some went to Africa. And so we were scattered all over the place. And as some kind of refuge, we thought the church would be a refuge. The church would be a ark. The church would be a Zor. The church would be a Goshen. We thought that. But the church was very heavily involved in slavery. Many of its members were slave owners. And so you know that. This is not hidden. This is open secret, is it? It's there that the church invested in slavery. Many of them were slave owners. Moses realized that the slave owners in Egypt were not his friends. Regardless of what Pharaoh had to offer him, when he saw his own people, the magnetism that drew him to them, he says, I would rather suffer the affliction with my people. But today, the minute we make it good, we move to the suburbs and we dwell with the enemies, believing they're friends, even though they're plotting against us. Moses said, you can keep that. I don't want that. And so at 18 years old, he left and he went to the Cushites, and he became king at 27 years old with the Cushites. Moses, yes, according to the Jasher and also Josephus, says Moses was king of the Cushites, and he ruled many years there. He was our king. So please, Moses is my ancestor. David is my ancestor. Abraham is my ancestor. Joseph is my ancestor. And you are telling me that I must choose a Eurocentric gospel religion? Come on. No. You owe it to yourself. You owe your soul a duty of care. You owe your soul a duty of care. And so when Moses told our people, if you don't obey, he will send you back on ships to Egypt. But he wasn't referring to ancient Egypt. Egypt means bondage. Yeah, very often in the Bible says, did I not take you out of bondage out of Egypt? So the word means bondage. And so the question, another question must be asked. Which group of people over the years were brought to America and Britain as slaves? Which group? You can come up with any kind of reasoning, foolish reasoning. But we know that the black people who came from Africa, they were brought back in ships and were sold. They were sold. And the lighter their skin, the more money they would raise. That's it. And the church existed at that time, even as the church existed in South Africa during apartheid. And the church did exist during the time in America when people were being lynched. The church existed in the Caribbean too when slavery was there. In fact, the Morant Bay Rebellion started by a deacon in the church. Oh, yes. And so one is surprised that this contemporary assembly is so silent. Why? Why? Because they are not prepared to suffer the affliction of their people. They're not. They are not at all. And let me turn to the book of Lamentation. Come with me there, because we want to make sure that this thing is understood by our people, and it's a challenge for them, particularly those people who have found themselves rooted in Eurocentric gospel, misrepresented by those who present it. And so I hope what I'm saying will drive them back to the word of Yah, if nothing else. Come with me to Lamentation chapter 4 and verse 2. And the word says, the precious sons of Zion, that's us, they are comparable to fine gold. Did you hear that? When you read that in the word of Yah, you ought to look at yourself and thank Yah for making you that way. When David saw himself, the Bible says David was ruddy like this one. He said, I am wonderfully and beautifully made. Isn't that what he said? I am beautifully and wonderfully made. That's what David said. He said, we're like fine gold, esteemed as earthen pictures, the work of the hands of the potter. We are the clay. Of course we are the clay, because Yah took clay from the brown soil and made the man Adam, and then he put everybody in his loin from which we came. We are that. We are like fine gold. We are the children of Zion. And so one must contain oneself, because we're finding out who we are. Come with me to verse 8 of the same chapter. Their visage, he's identifying who they are. Their visage, well, you're talking about facial, that's what we're talking about. We understand what visage means. It says their visage is blacker than coal. Some Bible says soot. They are not known in the street. Their skin cleaveth to their bone. It is withered. It has become like stick. They are black. Lamentation. This is Jeremiah who wrote Lamentation, and he's telling you that they're black. Come with me to Hika. That's the same Lamentation, chapter 5 and verse 10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Here it is again. Black. That's what he says. And so understand this, because that thought is preserved in the writing of Kohelet. It is preserved there in the writing of Ecclesiastes, of Solomon, chapter 10 and verse 7. Listen to what Solomon says. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. Did you get that? Let me try and explain that. Solomon says, I have seen princes walking on foot. That's not what princes do. They ride on horseback. But he says the servants, the people who are supposed to be the tail, are playing the head. They are sitting in Shem's tent as princes when they're servants. Let's go back to Moses. Moses was a prince of Egypt. He refused to ride on horseback so that he could walk like servant with his own people, so that he could uplift them at a later stage. Are you with me? Many of us, in our walks of life, in our churches, wherever we live, we are princes. Did you not hear what Psalm 68:31 says? Princes will come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia will one day stretch his hand onto Yah to bring him the ark of the covenant. Did you not hear that? Yes. That's us. And yet, sometimes we feel as if we are afraid to even mention it in case we offend other people. If truth offends you, what religion is it that you have? What religion? And so we want to know if you believe in Moses. So come with me to the book of Numbers, chapter 12, and we will read, and Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. I mentioned earlier that he became king of the Cushite, and then he married an Ethiopian woman then. He married a Cushite. He was the same color as them, so it didn't matter. The concern here is not about color. The concern was about different beliefs. But according to the book of Jasher, he never touched her. For he married an Ethiopian woman, and they said, hath Yahweh indeed spoken only to Moshe? So they were using that situation to challenge Moses' authority. Has Yahweh only spoken to Moses? No, he speaks to us. Because you see, Miriam was also a prophetess, and Aaron a priest. So they're thinking, well, we're up there too. No, but Moses is the leader. Moses is your leader. I speak to Moses face to face. But to the others, I speak to them in dreams. Did you not understand it? Were you not afraid? And so my question to Uncle Sam, when you found out that the people you brought here in slavery, I'm talking to Westminster Parliament as well, Wilberforce knew. Oh, yes, Churchill knew. They knew that the people you had in slavery, they were the original black Israelites. Were you not afraid? Are you not afraid? And you concealed it in the writings of history and hid it. And if anybody should speak of that, you get offended. Well, Yah is speaking of it. Yah is speaking of it. My servant Moses is faithful in all my house, says Yah. That's what he said. With him I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. I don't speak to Moses in parables. I speak in Paleo Hebrew to him. That's how I speak. Wherefore then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? Were you? England, America, were you not afraid to hold Yah's servants, black Israelites, in slavery for all that time? And when they argued against it, when they complained against it, they were lynched, beaten, miseducated, taught that to hate themselves. Were you not afraid? Those slaves whose blood ran like rivers in the killing fields, am I to assume not that their blood doesn't cry out to Yah now, even as the blood of Abel cried out? And if so, how will Yah respond? You know what's interesting as I look through this? Come with me. The word says, and the anger of Yahudah was kindled against them. You don't want Yah to get angry with you. And he departed, and the cloud departed from the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. I'm looking at that. If they became white, or if she became white, she must have been a different color. Are you with me? And then that very thought drove me to, you remember the prophet, don't you? You remember Gehazi, don't you? When Naaman was healed and the prophet decided, I don't want anything from him, and Gehazi thought, you can't let him go like that and not take anything. And then soon the man heard pitter-patter behind him. It was Gehazi running, and then he too became leprous, white as snow. I'm not going to develop that, just throw it out for your consideration, that this, when leprosy came, which is a disease of Egypt, the people became white as snow, says the word of Yah. That's what it says. So the word is this: if we shall go back to Genesis 9:27. That's Bereshit. It says that they have, I'm paraphrasing, infiltrated the land of Israel. May Yah enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem. Japheth, who are Khazars, they accepted Judaism during the 8th century to become Judaites, but they are Japhethites, they are Gentiles. But they're now in the land of Shem, where the real Shemite ought to be. And the real Shemite, many of their descendants, are still in the lands of slavery, says Baruch. We have got to take a stock of that and understand our history. We've got to take a stock and understand. The regal nomad Negroes exiled from the kingdom of Judah were the recipients of injustice meted out by the black Hamitic Africans, the perpetrators who sold their own people in terms of color, but different in belief, to the Khazars and to the Arabs. And so today we stand on the threshold of a new era wherein we're called to examine our own history. And I just want to close out here with a few verses so nobody may think that I'm just conjecturing about the issue of color. It's not about color, it's about righteousness. I want you to understand that. But in Daniel 7, come with me there, 9, the word says, I beheld, this is Daniel. Of course, Daniel was a black man too. You better understand that. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the ancients of days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. Did you hear me? This is Daddy, our Father. Daniel says he has hair like wool. His throne was like the fiery furnace, and his wheel was famed burning fire. A fiery stream came forth before him. So we know that our Father has hair like us, woolly hair. You cannot deny that. Let's go to the book of Revelation, chapter 1, and read from verse 12. John is told, that's Yohanan, he's in vision. And he's told in verse 19, John, Yohanan, write down what you have seen. Write it down. You've seen me in vision in my glorious form. Write it down. Write down also the other things you have seen and the things that ought to come. 3 things. So John wrote it down. John says, I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and being turned, I saw 7 candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to his foot, and girt about his paps with golden girdle. His head and his hair were like pure wool, like his Father, like mine, like yours. He has hair like wool and white as snow, because he's the angel, he's from the Ancient of Days. His Father is the Ancient of Days. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like burning brass. His feet is like brass that is burned in the fire, stark. And if they were burned in the furnace, and his voice was the sound of many waters. Are you with me? So the Father looks like us. The Son looks like the Father who looks like us. And so the Father sent the Son, according to John 5:22, says, the Father judgeth no man, but all judgment is given to the Son. But you know that in a jury of any case, you must be judged by your peers. You know that. So Hebrew picks this up, Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 17. It says, for this reason, he had to be made like his brothers, that's you and I, in every way, so that he might become a merciful, faithful Kohen Agadal, high priest, in service to Yahweh in order to make atonement for the sins of his people. He had to look like us. That's what the word says, in order for him to try us as one of his peers. So we're thankful this morning, and I ask that as we look at our own history, we look at it not only by way of the sociologists or the scholars and the anthropologists look at it, but in terms of how Yah has written it. So Moses, this man who was a lawgiver, he was also faithful. So the law and the faith are not mutually exclusive. They're the same. You cannot say you have faith and you don't keep the commandments. It doesn't make sense. And Moses is showing you that. That's why he's in the all of faith. He was a lawgiver, but he's also faithful. You can't say the law is done away with and you have faith. You kid yourself. So may Yah give us greater understanding to these things, even as we understand who we are. We know now our identity, that we are the children of Yah. And you know what? It would be amiss just to go away just like that and not consolidate the points all here in the book of Zephaniah, Sephanas. Let's close with Sephanas, because the word said, let's do verse 1 of chapter 1. And the word of Yahweh, which came unto Zephaniah, the son of Cushi. The son of who? Cushi. The son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, and the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. He's telling you, I'm a black prophet, and I'm from the house of David. Did you hear that? And so chapter 3 in verse 10 says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliant, my worshippers, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. So Yah chose Abraham and says, Abraham, you're going to start the family that will become a nation. He raised up Moses, and Moses became the man who started that nation. And then he raised up King David. David is the man who started the eternal kingdom, and we are part of that, because even Simon of Cyrene helped to carry the cross. Simon of Cyrene is in Libya. Libya is Put, the son of Am. May we understand these things, because we ask. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.